start over. Okay, so let's look at the examples that they've got in the book. So we've got Tamara. So she earns $173,760 per year. She's paid semi-monthly. Okay, so same thing. Semi-monthly. Again, if it's a different pay frequency, you're going to divide the salary by a different number. So if it was bi-weekly, we would be dividing this by 26, and they would reach that wage base on a different date, right? Because it's not on the same schedule. Tamara earns $173,760 per year. She's paid semi-monthly on the 15th and 30th. Determine the FICA. Now, in this case, they just want they're not looking for the net pay. That's kind of an extra. I didn't charge you any extra for that. That goes a little bit further than most of the problems do. They're looking for the FICA tax for the December 30th payroll. So that's the 24th pay. So we would have to figure out what she had earned year to date up to the 23rd pay. So we would take, they've done the math here, 24 pays, so she gets $72.40 every pay period. We multiply that by 23 pay periods. She's up to $166,520. I mean, you can do in your head, you know, intuitively, okay, she made $166,520 up to the last pay period, and now she's making $72.40. Well, obviously, that's going to get her above the $168,600, right? You can do that in your head to know that she's in that pay period. It takes a little bit more to figure out what the exact tax is, though, at that point. All right, so here they did. Step 2, $168,600 minus the year-to-date, prior period year-to-date. So she had $2,080 left to get up to that $168,600. We're going to multiply that by 6.2%. What they've done here is they've included the employer's amount. Because remember, so this is how much the employee is paying, but all of those amounts, the employer is matching it. Okay. So 2,080 times the 6.2%. The full $72.40 is taxable for Medicare purposes. So that's times the 1.45%. So this part is step 4 here. Total FICA, if you recall, FICA consists of OASDI and Medicare tax. So if you see that term FICA, they want both together. Okay, they want both of these numbers. Remember, these are both FICA. Who is FICA and why are they taking all my money? Total FICA would be the $128.96 plus the $104.98. So in this pay period, Tamara's paying $233.94 and the employer is also paying $233.94. So that's the answer. They were looking for the FICA. We could figure out what her net paycheck is if we wanted to, but that's all right. Let's see what the next one is. Okay, let's look at this one. Sambit. I don't know where they come up with these names. Interesting names. Okay, so Sambit earns $225,000 a year and is paid monthly. So now we're over that $200,000. Determine the FICA for the November 30th payroll. Okay, so we have to do the same thing. We have to figure out what they've earned up to the payroll immediately preceding today's. So in this case, he's paid monthly. So we're going to take the 225 divided by 12 to get the amount that he makes per month. He makes $18,750 per month. How many payrolls were run before the November 30th payroll? So we're in November 30th. That would be the 11th pay, 11th month, paid on a monthly basis. So there were 10 before today. All right. So he earned $187,500 before today. He is over. The nice thing about the additional Medicare tax part is you don't have to worry about the OASDI. You don't have, because the person is earning over, they've reached over 168.6 because they're over 200,000, right? So you don't have to do like this stuff. You really don't have to worry about. All you're calculating is the regular Medicare tax and the additional Medicare tax at that point. Does that make sense?
Yes. So on the test, really things won't get doctored by not showing it, correct? Because there's not space. You don't have to actually do the work.
Yeah. Yep. All right, so made 187.5 before today. They did do the step here, even though we know that we don't have to do this step because obviously he made 187.5. He's over 168.6. We're not stupid. We know that. So, but they put it on there because apparently they don't realize that we don't need to see that, but that's fine. But how much is he going to be taxed for Medicare tax? So his Medicare tax, obviously all of it is going to be subject to regular Medicare tax, right? Because it's always going to be subject to Medicare tax. Medicare, go ahead.
I know this is a really silly question, but okay, FICA again is all of the taxes together. That's what FICA is, the OASDI and the Medicare
tax. Yep, that's FICA. Because FICA is the law that established those taxes, and then Medicare tax was added to that law. It was a supplement to that FICA law when it was passed. All right, so how much is going to be taxed? We're going to take the 18,750 times the full 1.45%, because I don't need these steps here. So that's our Medicare. So 18,750, 1.45%. So this is just our regular Medicare tax. What'd they get here? 271.88. All right. So in order to figure out how much of his current period wages are subject to the additional Medicare tax, what we're going to do is we're going to add our prior period wages, total prior period wages, which we calculated. Well, I don't know if they showed it to us. Well, this one was 187.5. How'd they do this? Oh, they've already done it. So how they get this, the 206,250 is they take the prior period, so that 187,500, add the current period, 18,750, 206,250. That's where they got that. So now we want, how much have they earned today, including today? So, and then we're going to subtract 200,000. So 206,250, and this is really going to be like in the pay period that you reach 200,000, because we know in all following pay periods that year, it's all going to be subject to additional Medicare tax. So this is really the only time you're going to do this little calculation. So we're going to take our current period year-to-date pay, 206,250, and we're going to subtract the 200,000. And we're going to multiply that by the tax rate. So 206,250, so here's our additional. Again, that's our year-to-date, including this pay period, pay. Minus 200,000, so 6250. That is how much of the, don't pay attention to that. We're using his numbers. This is how much of the 18,750 is going to be subject to additional Medicare tax this pay period. None of it's going to be subject to Social Security tax. He's over the, like I said, if you're calculating additional Medicare tax for someone in that pay period, you do not have to worry about the Social Security tax because they're already above the Social Security. Now, there's going to come a time in the next few years when that's not the case because, as I said, we're up to, for 2026, that wage base is now 183. Probably by 2030, it's going to be above 200,000, right? So then you will have to worry about it. But right now, we don't have to worry about it. All right, so 6,250 times 5625. So that's our year-to-date pay. The employer, remember, does not match that. Only the employee pays that amount. $12.15.
This is also a tax self-employed who would pay as well.
Okay, we're going to get to self-employed people. Yep. That's good because that's a great segue for me. That takes me right into the next topic, which is what happens when somebody has wages and they have self-employment income and combined they're over the limit. So remember that wage base applies to all wages earned, all earned income, I should say. So that includes self-employment income, income from a partnership, that sort of stuff, and W-2 wages. So it applies to all earned income during a calendar year per individual. So each of you gets that wage base for all the earned income you make in the calendar year. And then we start a new year and it all goes back down to zero again. So there are people, of course, that have multiple jobs. If you have 2 W-2 jobs, each employer is going to treat it as though that's your only job that you have. So they're going to withhold based on all of the income you earned from them. So if you have one job where you're making $100,000, and then maybe you switch jobs during the year, and you make another $100,000 at your second employer, both employers are going to tax in full $100,000. Even though combined, you're over the $168,600, right? You're at $200,000. What happens is when you file your own personal tax return, you get a refund of that overpayment of Social Security tax. Does that make sense? So you got 2 W-2 jobs, each W-2. So remember, the most Social Security, and we're just talking about Social Security tax because it's the only thing that has a wage base. The most you're going to pay, I guess I can get rid of this so it's not confusing. So 168.6 times 6.2%. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. $10,453.20. This is the maximum Social Security tax per individual in 2024. So, as an individual, you will not have to pay. Okay, so this is, I shouldn't say that. Because don't think about self-employment tax right now. Self-employment tax is separate. So maximum Social Security tax for a W-2 employee, because you're only paying the one half of it. Maximum that you will pay per year is $10,453.20 in 2024. That amount goes up in 2025 because our wage base maximum goes up. Right? Our tax rate didn't change, but our wage base expanded. So that's why there's a difference there. Okay, so let's say you have 2 jobs. And I'll refer to them as W-2 income because you would receive a W-2 at the end of the year for any. I'm sure most of you, if you've had a job, you've received a W-2 at the end of the year and you use that then to file your tax return. Okay, so that's what, when I'm talking about W-2, I'm talking about as an employee. Okay, so 2 W-2 jobs, job 1, job 2. You have $100,000 here of income, $100,000 here. So total of $200,000 that you earned of earned income during the year. Well, the maximum that you'll be taxed on is $168,600. That's the maximum you have to pay tax on. But each employer is taxing on the full $100,000. So this employer, so the OASDI, you had $6,200 withheld. You had $6,200 withheld. You've paid $12,400 in OASDI tax because each of those employers withheld $6,200, but you were only required to pay $10,452.20. So what happens is when individuals file their tax return, when you are entering information on the tax return through software, it asks you to enter all the information for a W-2. On that W-2, it includes information about how much has been paid in Social Security tax and Medicare tax and additional Medicare tax because the software is doing a calculation behind the scenes to see if that was correct. And if it wasn't correct, because sometimes employers make mistakes on them, even, like a mathematical mistake, then if you were overpaid, you'll get a refund. If you underpaid, you'll have to pay it more. But in this case, what would happen is that would show up on the 1040 as an overpayment of Social Security taxes. So you would get a refund of the difference. It'd be added to whatever other income tax refund you have. Or if you owe money, it would offset that money. Okay, so that's where the reconciliation for it happens. It does not happen at the employer level. The employer has no idea what other jobs you have. They don't know what your other income is. They don't have any idea about that. So they can't account for it in their payroll system, right? That's up to the employee to take care of. But also sometimes we have not only we've got a job, but then we've also got self-employment income. We have a side hustle. Right? A lot of people have side hustles. So when we have a side hustle, what happens is it is up to the individual to calculate correctly how much self-employment tax they make. Now, luckily for you, you're in a payroll tax class, and the payroll professional doesn't have to do that calculation. It's up to the individual, but we do go through it. Okay, so, but if you're in practice as a payroll professional, you're just writing out a check to the person. That's up to them to figure out how much tax they owe on it. But this is how it works. So self-employed tax, so the self-employment tax, remember this is SECA. So in addition to the tax rate being doubled, there are a couple of other slight differences on it. So with FICA tax, it starts at the first dollar that you earn. Okay, you're taxed Social Security and Medicare tax on the first dollar that you earn if you're an employee. As a self-employed individual, you actually get to exclude, well, I shouldn't say you get to exclude. If you don't make more than $400 in net earnings, you don't have to pay self-employment tax. Now, if you make $401, you have to pay self-employment tax on all of it. So that's why I say you don't exclude it, the first $400, but if it's under that amount, you don't have to pay self-employment tax on it. So that's what they're talking about here. And it's on the net earnings. So net earnings, obviously, we start with our gross, and we subtract subtract deductions to get to our net. So if you're self-employed, let's say you make $100,000, but you also you pay rent, and that was $6,000, and you pay insurance, business insurance, not health insurance, that goes someplace else, but business insurance of $1,000. And then you pay, say you pay a contractor to help you with something, and that was $10,000. So you have these expenses that offset your gross income. Now your net is $83,000. This is the amount you pay the tax on. So you do get to deduct expenses that are directly related to earning that money. So you don't get taxed on the gross, you get taxed on the net. And that's what they're talking about here, net earnings, okay? Included in that, if you're a partner in a partnership, would also be if you received any distributions from the partnership, that is also included in the net earnings. So distributive share, not distributions, and I'm not going to get into the intricacies of how partnerships work, but if you're in a partnership, whatever share of the net earnings is yours, that is included in the calculation of for self-employment income. So recall, SECA tax is 15.3% in total, but that $168,600, that wage base applies to all earned income during the year. So that would include the self-employment income that you earned. So if you had $100,000 of W-2 income, let me erase this, and you had, so here's our net income, $83,000 of self-employment income, well, together you've made $183,000. This employer has withheld on all of this, has withheld Social Security tax on all of that income, but together you're over the $168,600. So you get to make an adjustment for that on the self-employment taxes that you pay on this income, because you're still only subject to the Social Security tax up to $168,600. All right, so let's look at it I think I've got well, this is an easy one, and then we'll do a little bit harder one. I've got another step-by-step instruction in here for when we have W-2 income and self-employment income and that calculation, okay? All right, this one's pretty easy though. We've got Celia. Her wages from her job are, okay, her wages from her job are $170,000. So that means even just from her job, she has met the $168,600, right? She's met the cap. She doesn't have to pay, if she has another W-2 job, they are going to withhold, but she's going to get that money back. She doesn't have to pay, she's no longer responsible for any additional Social Security tax because she's already made $170,000, but she's got a side hustle and her net income from the side hustle is $15,000. This means that of that $15,000, none of it is subject to Social Security tax. It's only going to be subject to Medicare tax. And she doesn't get up to the additional Medicare tax threshold because her total income is $185,000. So from her job, she's reached that cap, so the additional self-employment income has no Social Security tax associated with it. Okay? I'm going to go through, I'm seeing a lot of blank stares here. Let me show you the steps. Okay, under the same page in Canvas, and I really do recommend that you use these when you're doing the problems in your homework, okay, these to help you. These are the steps to calculate FICA and SECA. So FICA tax if you're a W-2 employee, SECA tax if you're self-employed, and then if you're both, you want to use these. When someone has a W-2 job and a side hustle, they're subject to both FICA and SECA tax. So here are the steps. The first one is to calculate the FICA on the W-2 wages only. So you'd use the same steps that we used before for calculating what that is. So for our homework problems, calculate just the employee portion, because your homework problems are going to ask you how much the individual had to pay. So, or how much was withheld, how much has to be withheld, or how much they have to pay in SECA tax. You're basing it only on how much the individual has paid. Do not include how much the employer has paid. Okay? There is a page. Let's see. Yep. So under Chapter 3, calculations and whiteboard examples. Yep. These are the steps we just went through with calculating current period FICA, and then these are the steps when you have FICA and SECA tax. So first off, calculate the FICA on W-2 wages only. We can use this example here. So let's see. So our FICA, and again, that is Social Security and Medicare tax. So on $100,000, we have OASDI, it's an S, of, remember this is 6.2%, so this is $6,200. And then our Medicare tax is 1.45%, Medicare, so $1,450. So in total, we've got $7,650, 7.65% of $100,000. All right, that's step one. So here's one. We've done that. Step two, calculate the Medicare tax on total self-employment earnings. We're only going to calculate the Medicare tax on this. So here's our self-employment earnings. All right, so this is step 2 times 1.4, oops, sorry. It's bad, it's not 1.45, it's 2.9% because it's self-employment tax. Okay, calculate the Medicare tax. Medicare, remember that tax rate is double what it is for when you're an employee. So 83,000. 2407. That's step 2. Step 3, subtract the wage base from W-2 earnings and then calculate the full SECA tax on that portion of the self-employment earnings. All right, let's go through that. So here's step 3. Oh, sorry. I'm going to erase this so you can actually see. Step 3. So we're going to subtract the wage base from, and actually I think I have this backwards. No, W-2 earnings. Do I have that backwards? Subtract the wage base from W-2 earnings. I think I have that backwards. 168,600 minus 100,000. This is what I'm trying to do is figure out how much is remaining. I have that backwards. I should say subtract the W-2 earnings from the wage base. So 68,600. This is the amount that we have remaining that would be subject to Social Security tax, right? Up to that amount. We earned this from our W-2. This amount of our self-employment income is going to be subject to Social Security tax. So, sorry, I'll fix that. The order. It's supposed to say subtract W-2 earnings from the wage base is what it should say. Calculate the full SECA tax on that portion of self-employment earnings. And actually, I've got that wrong too. It should just be the OASDI because we've already calculated the Medicare tax. There's a couple parts there. I'm just going to change this right now so that I don't have to think about it later. So subtract the W-2 earnings from the wage base. And calculate the OSDI only. Because we already calculated, right here, we already calculated the Medicare tax, the SECA tax. Sorry, I have to change that in the other class too. All right, so subtract the W-2 earnings from the OASDI wage base, which we did. If this was negative, then just like the other step, none of it would be subject to Social Security tax, right? Because it means you're already over the OASDI wage base. So 68.6, calculate the SECA tax, OASDI only, on that portion of self-employment earnings. Now, this is where you've got to remember that that tax rate is doubled. That's why I say SECA tax here. So this has to be times 12.124. This is times 12.4%. Let me put it in percentages, sorry. So 68,600 times 0.124, 8506.40. So in total, the last part, if the problem is asking you how much in total in Social Security and Medicare tax did they pay from both, you add all three together. Okay, so 8506.40 plus 2407 plus 7650, they paid $18,563.40 total in Social Security and Medicare taxes on $100,000 of wages and $83,000 of net self-employment income. These two are going to be paid on their tax return, or they make quarterly estimated payments. But it's not going to be withheld. The individual is going to be in charge of paying that. The payroll department has withheld. So that's already been prepaid. How are we doing on time? Ooh, we're almost done. Let's see. So here's an example. This isn't a very good example because in this case they actually didn't go over the wage base. But we've got Prebin. Wages from his job are $68,250. Self-employment income, net self-employment income was $94,500. How much is, and this should say SECA, how much is a SECA on $94,500? So what we would do in this case, we want to see, okay, well, did he exceed the 168.6 combined with both of them? So we're going to add them together, see if he exceeded it. So 68,250 plus the 94,500 is 162,750. He didn't exceed 168.6, right? So he didn't exceed the wage base, the Social Security wage base. So all of that 94,500 is going to be subject to SECA tax. Okay? In our example, not all of it was subject to SECA tax because we exceeded the 168.6. So the 94,500 we're going to multiply by 12.4%. Remember, that's our SECA tax rate. So for W-2, so SECA, just as a reminder, OASDI is 12.4% and Medicare is 2.9% for a total of 15.3%. They're paying both halves of that. So 94.5 times 12.4, he's going to pay $11,718 in Social Security tax. And then he's got to pay the Medicare tax as well, $94,500 times 2.9%, 27.40 and 50 cents. So his Social Security and Medicare tax on that additional $94,500 is $14,458.50. So he's going to have to pay that separately himself. Questions? I know you guys kind of have a little bit of a glazed look on your faces. It's a lot of information. What I have in here, I want to point you under the Chapter 3 agenda. If you could go to your Chapter 3 agenda, under today's schedule, which today's the 25th, there is a document called Social Security Medicare Calculations. It's right at the end of the day there. Click on that. I have 12 problems here. 12 sample problems that you can work on. And what I'd like to do is when we come back next Tuesday is to go through these together. But I want you to have worked on them first. Okay, I want you to get a start on them so that we can go through the calculations. Try some of these. Use that step by step. Okay, use those steps that I have put in there, especially now that I corrected that one. Use those to help you with these problems. Okay, all right.